A pleasant day to everyone. My name is Benzar, a second-year MSD Physics student and a former senior high school physics teacher at Carmen National High School. I'm glad to present to you my research entitled Learning Physics, Cross-Cultural Perceptions of Students in Carmen, Cotabato. This survey project is under the direct supervision of my advisor, Dr. Maricar Prudente. Let me begin by stating that culture is a way of life. It is a paradigm that shapes how we perceive events in our surroundings. Accordingly, beliefs, attitudes, and performances in science receive influence from one's cultural background. Pew Research Center provides that across all their survey's individual science knowledge items, there were variations by race and ethnicity. In developing countries like the Philippines, science education anchors on Western concepts and principles and is taught by those for whom science is often unrelated to their culture. In addition, cultural diversity among Filipino learners suggests that indigenous beliefs and preferences are unique in each ethnic group. On a different note, the number of physics classes teachers handle affects the learner's perception and performance in the subject. Unlike in the Metro Manila, physics teachers in Soksargen and ARMM hold the least number of physics loads. What's more concerning is that learners in rural areas still have beliefs firmly rooted in indigenous concepts about natural phenomena, which sometimes do not adhere to the accepted scientific explanations taught in school. These issues inspired me to explore the learners' perceptions in learning physics in Carmen, Cotabato, a relatively small area in south-central Mindanao inhabited by people of different ethno-linguistic groups. It's an attempt to strengthen my understanding of my learners who are in a multicultural setting. This matter has always been highly relevant to the area with or without pandemic. Specifically, this study aims to determine the perceptions of students in learning physics, determine the similarities and differences in perceptions across sex, age, ethno-linguistic group, and religious affiliation, and determine the relationship between interest, self-efficacy, and attitude toward learning physics. The Cotabato province shelters a multicultural community. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, the province is inhabited primarily by three cultural groups, Cebuano, Ilonggo, and Maguindanaon. Each group is unified by common ethnicity and language. Thus, the term ethno-linguistic group is a standard term for classification. It must be noted that Maguindanaon people are native to the area, as the other two originated from Central and West Visayas. The survey involved 93 senior high school students. They were selected using quota sampling to attain 31 equal numbers of respondents who belong to the three major ethno-linguistic groups. This study utilized a questionnaire adapted from Dari's research entitled Understanding Middle School Students' Perceptions of Physics Using Girl-Friendly and Integrated STEM Strategies, a gender study. The survey included 4 socio-demographic questions and 15 Likert-type questions subdivided into 3 constructs of perceptions: interest, self-efficacy, and attitude based on OITO 2014. The instrument's reliability was tested with Cronbach's alpha equal to 0.854. The study is primarily descriptive comparative. The online questionnaire was administered from November to December 2020. Before that, a formal communication letter was sent to school officials and students were informed of the survey's nature. The analysis involved a series of statistical tests such as measures of central tendency, t-test, one-way ANOVA, etc. The confidence interval is set to 95%. Out of 93 respondents, the majority were females. Most of them fall under the age bracket of 16 to 18. The number of each ethno-linguistic group was equally predetermined. 39 respondents were Catholics and 32 were Muslims. Only 22 were Protestants. Objective number 1. Determine the perceptions of students in learning physics. Table 1 summarizes students' interest in learning physics with an overall mean of 3.65. Statement 1, I like learning how things work, got the highest mean, which verbally describes strongly agree. This suggests that learners are more interested in concepts and principles explaining how events in the environment take place or interact as governed by the laws of physics. Item number 5, physics is one of my favorite subjects in senior high school, got the lowest mean with a verbal description of neutral. This is the visual representation of the table to further illustrate that students gravitate to the first statement, or I1. It also shows their lack of agreement with the fifth statement. This is congruent with a study stating that focusing on real-world contextual relevance and emphasizing conceptual understanding sparked the learner's interest in learning physics. It supports the findings of Judin and Eronosio that physics is not one of the most preferred subjects of interest to students. Table 2 reports the student's self-efficacy in learning physics with an overall mean of 3.65. Item number 2, my knowledge in physics helps me deal with situations in everyday life, got the highest mean of 4.04, which translates to strongly agree. In contrast, item number 1, I easily understand physics topics, got the lowest mean of 3.02, described as neutral. These figures illustrate their high agreement with the second statement, which pertains to their confidence that their knowledge in physics helps them deal with situations in everyday life, and their neutrality to the first statement that topics in physics are easy to understand. It agrees with Lomolio that students often associate physics with abstract terms and long, cruel examinations, which make the students less confident in learning the subject. Responses regarding the student's attitude toward learning physics got an overall mean of 3.86. Item number 5, I like when I can relate to the topics in physics class, garnered the highest mean of 4.32, which describes strongly agree. In contrast, item number 2, I like using math to solve science problems, got the lowest mean of 3.42, which describes as agree. This is the visual representation of the data. As we can see, students have strong agreement with the fifth statement or A5 and less on A2, which pertains to their preference for using mathematics in solving problems. The data support the findings of Ikisi that mathematical calculation is the main reason students perceive physics as a difficult subject. In addition, Kelly states that students are more engaged when they feel that their learning relates to life outside the classroom. Objective number 2, determine the similarities and differences in students' perceptions in learning physics across sex, age, ethno-linguistic group, and religious affiliation. The t-test reveals no significant difference between the interest, self-efficacy, and attitude of both sexes towards learning physics, so there is not enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis. It supports the findings of Kayan and Boyuk, Laudon et al., and Dare. However, it contradicts the findings that boys have greater self-efficacy in their ability in mathematics and hard sciences than girls, and that biology courses and careers attract more females than other areas of science. Independent sample Kruskal-Wallis test was used to determine if there are significant differences in the students' perceptions across age groups. The results indicates that there is no significant difference between interest, self-efficacy, and attitude of students toward learning physics. The data must be attributed to the close age brackets of the respondents, as they are all in senior high school. Analysis of variance shows no significant difference between their interest and attitude toward learning physics. However, there is a significant difference between their self-efficacy in learning physics, so the evidence is enough to reject the null hypothesis. A post hoc Tukey procedure reveals no significant difference between self-efficacy in learning physics of Cebuano and Ilonggo students. However, a significant difference was found between Cebuano and Maguindanaoan students and between Ilonggo and Maguindanaoan students. Maguindanaoan students have a significantly lower self-efficacy in learning physics among the three groups. This is consistent with the results of Orleans that Region 12 and ARMM, where Maguindanaoan students reside, have lesser confidence in learning physics. Parallel to Morales' findings, the lack of teachers who can speak or who belong to the Maguindanaoan ethno-linguistic group could explain why Maguindanaoan students are less confident as they perceive the subject as isolated and irrelevant. Cebuano and Ilonggo students live in town, while most Maguindanaoan students reside in barangays. This could affect their perceptions of learning the subject, as explained by the results of Bellio and Kiraro and Okiri 2008. Independent samples Kruskal-Wallis test shows no significant difference in the students' interest and attitude toward learning physics. Still, there is a significant difference in their self-efficacy in learning physics when grouped according to their religious affiliations. A post hoc Mann-Whitney test with Bonferroni correction reveals no significant difference in self-efficacy in learning physics between Protestant and Catholic students. However, the self-efficacy of Muslim students is significantly lower than that of Protestant and Catholic students. Findings are congruent to Rees that religious beliefs influence the acquisition of scientific concepts both positively and negatively. Objective number 3, determine the relationship between interest, self-efficacy, and attitude toward learning physics. Pearson correlation reveals a positive medium correlation between interest and self-efficacy in learning physics, a positive medium correlation between interest and attitude toward learning physics, and a strong positive correlation between self-efficacy and attitude toward learning physics, all with a p-value less than 0.001. It implies that when students' interest in physics increases, it is more likely that their self-efficacy and attitude toward learning physics will also increase, and vice versa. This is congruent with Lomolio's and Wino's findings. These are my findings for my objective number 1. Concepts explaining the workings of the environment draw more interest to students, yet they do not regard physics as their favorite subject. They manifest less self-efficacy in understanding physics concepts, but once learned, they exhibit high confidence in applying them to reality. Preference gravitates less toward solving problems and more toward lessons relevant to their everyday life. As we can see, the perceptions that have been extracted from the students' interest, self-efficacy, and attitude toward learning physics thematically revolve around the idea of relevance. Therefore, instruction must strengthen conceptual understanding and emphasize its interplay with the mathematical skills needed for the subject. Also, teachers should localize examples and questions and avoid culturally biased ones found in most physics books. Objective number 2. Sex and age are not factors of perceptions in learning physics. Maguindanaoan students have lower self-efficacy in learning physics. Muslim students' self-efficacy in learning physics is substantially lower than that of Catholic and Protestant students. Therefore, teachers must be immersed in the Maguindanaoan culture and language. Teachers must at least be familiar with the Muslim way of life and have developed cultural sensitivity throughout their careers. Also, empowering science teachers native to the area is deemed necessary. I mentioned earlier that this research aims to understand my learners who are in a multicultural setting. Determining the similarities and differences in perceptions by each cultural group helps us address issues that are only specific to some students. This will promote inclusiveness and equity in a multicultural classroom. Lastly, a positive relationship between interest, self-efficacy, and attitude toward learning physics is evident. When students find the subject interestingly relevant to their daily lives, they tend to have higher self-efficacy and positive attitude towards it. As a result, culturally relevant teaching practices are highly in demand in this area. These are my references. That would be all. Thank you for having me.